Still on budget expectations, economists say much more than the so-called balancing act will be needed from the Finance Minister. More on this, we are joined by economist at AlexForbes Khanyisa Phika. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Khanyisa. Outside of load shedding being the biggest risk to the South African economy, what's to be said about the expectations from the budget speech when it comes to economic growth this time around?
Thank you for having me. Good morning. I think it is quite a challenging backdrop for Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana to actually table this budget because it's much anticipated. As you mentioned, we need to know what the Eskom debt take-up is going to be, which has impeded, load shedding has impeded a lot of our growth prospects. And we know with the slowing global backdrop, it poses great challenge to South Africa, considering that most of our trading partners are also going to slow in growth momentum, meaning that demand for our exports and some of our produce is going to be limited. So yes, we expect that from last year's MTBPS growth projections, the National Treasury will revise downwards some of its growth projections for the outer years. We do hope to see that they will detail some of that spend to alleviate load shedding by supporting Eskom and households that have tried to mitigate the costs of these mitigating measures, for example, having their own generators and other measures to mitigate the extent of how worse it has been. I mean, we're back at load shedding stage 6 now. It's really bad, and it's only the second month of the year.
Sure. Fiscal consolidation, Khanyisa, is also top on the list of expectations. What is anticipated on that front?
I think for the current fiscal year, we will be supported by the robust revenue taxes that we've seen, particularly personal income taxes and corporate income taxes have come to the party this time, supported by some of those commodity prices earlier on last year. Revenues also performed well, but we do know we have to take that with a bit of salt, considering that quite a large size of rebates also is anticipated then. So for this year, I think revenues will cushion some of the overspend that can come from relief for the flood-ridden provinces following these heavy rains that we've seen in recent weeks, and in addition to those support to the social distress grant that continues to be extended. So for this year, I think that will be cushioned, but beyond this fiscal year, it'll be challenging, and I think growth will come, or revenue growth will come from measures that SARS continues to take in terms of increasing that compliance dividend.
Speaking of relief and the social grant benefits, the extension thereof, as well as tax collection in South Africa, Khanyisa, I think one must also ask the question about the sustainability debate when it comes to the current public purse in South Africa and taxes as to how the state aims to pay for this in the long run.
I think they will have to, what we anticipate is to see if National Treasury will be able to reprioritize some of the underspending that didn't occur and see how they can allocate that to these sudden and pressures, right? But we do know that we don't have enough reserves in our budget to actually, so it won't be sustainable in terms of the kind of reserves that we have, meaning that we may need to borrow to support that, and already we know that the take-up of Eskom's debt, should it be taken at the third that has been tabled in MTBPS, that will also pose quite a stress to our debt trajectory.
Lastly, rating agencies have already warned of the effects of Eskom having an impact on the economy with the load shedding, along with the impact on businesses. What then is anticipated in terms of how the Finance Minister plays to the public gallery as well as the globe in terms of rating agencies in finding that balancing act?
I think what the rating agencies have continued to communicate is that they would need to actually see a lot of these infrastructure programs or reforms come into play. There is some progress that we've seen, particularly on the energy side, which is one of the largest impeding factors of our growth outlook. But I think this budget is important that government shows its intention. Yes, they've declared it as a state of national disaster, but how soon can they actually implement those reforms that will that will add to the national grid and support private sectors to actually take up some of the load to add additional electricity for South Africans? So I think the important part is, can we get rid of the severe stages of load shedding? We do understand that it will take time for our grid to be optimal, but in the current year and the next, how low can we bring down those load shedding stages? That will be key to this budget.
Thank you so much for your insights. The Economist at AlexForbes Khanyisa Phika talking to us as we extend in our rolling coverage leading up to the 2023 budget speech tomorrow.